Okay, let's unpack this. We've all been there, haven't we? That moment when the commitment you just made, even if it was just, one word, settles in your chest like a stone. You immediately regret the decision because every fiber of your being is screaming no, but your mouth has already committed to saying yes.
Mm-hmm. That sinking feeling.
Exactly. I'm talking about the obligatory sure you give to a demanding colleague when they ask you to stay late, perhaps, or the forced enthusiasm when you agree to one more exhausting volunteer task because you feel you simply cannot let anyone down. The human experience of saying yes when we mean no is universal, really. But the article we're diving into today, it just perfectly captures the physical cost of that internal lie.
It really does. It puts words to something many of us feel but maybe can't quite articulate.
Yeah. So the moment the word yes escapes your lips out of obligation, there's this quiet tightening, isn't there? Behind the smile. The body holds its breath, sort of waiting for relief that never comes. The article describes a specific contraction. The chest tightens, the throat constricts slightly, and a familiar heaviness settles into the rib cage, right beneath the sternum.
That heaviness, yeah. I recognize that.
It's the smile that feels painted on, isn't it? That bone-deep fatigue that sleep no longer touches because the mind is too busy running through the new list of obligations. You might make affectionate gestures for your partner, perhaps, but they feel rehearsed, like a script you are performing. And crucially, the pulse often remains unchanged, indifferent, even when you're engaging in something ostensibly loving or productive.
That's interesting, the pulse point, like the heart's not really in it.
Exactly. There's a subtle ache that lives just beneath the skin, the particular exhaustion that comes from sincerity performed instead of lived. Your body knows you are lying, even if your words are polite.
And what's fascinating here is that contraction you've just described, it's a signal, isn't it? It's the sympathetic nervous system basically saying, warning, resource drain incoming. We contract because we are preparing to survive something, even if that something is just a social obligation that feels too big to refuse. That is the physical evidence of the cost of the obligatory yes.
Right. Survival mode, even for small things.
And then, thankfully, there are other yeses that feel completely different. Yeses that feel like expansion, where time softens and the body finally breathes. We call this devotion. When you are operating from devotion, the physical signals flip completely because you are engaging the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state.
So instead of tightening, what does the body do? How does that expansion feel?
Well, there's quiet focus, where hours just dissolve and a natural warmth flows through you. There's unmistakable ease, alignment, and a deeply unforced and alive presence. Nothing feels like effort because it aligns with who you truly are deep down. Your shoulders drop, your breathing deepens, and you find yourself moving fluidly, not frantically. It's the difference between pushing a boulder up a hill and simply floating down a river, really.
That makes the mission of this deep dive really clear then. How can the same word, the same simple yes, drain you in one moment and fill you in another? We are diving into the question of sovereignty over our own energy and our choices, aren't we? And how to tell the difference through listening, really listening to our own bodies.
Precisely. And to structure this exploration, we are using a powerful framework called the Pathway to Sovereignty. This model gives us the language to recognize the difference between the automatic yes of obligation, which often comes from a place of survival or seeking approval, and the truly embodied yes of devotion, which arises from fullness, from a place of inner truth. The entire approach is built upon the incredibly insightful article by Helen Modiba titled, "When You Say Yes Out of Obligation versus Out of Devotion, How Your Body Knows the Difference."
Okay, let's set the context for this pathway then, because it's important to say this is absolutely not about achieving some sort of spiritual or emotional perfection where you only say yes to glorious things. That would be an impossible burden, wouldn't it?
Absolutely impossible and counterproductive.
Yeah. This is about listening to the body's signals as pure information, stripping away the judgment. Your exhaustion is communicating something important, as the article points out, much like a red light on a car dashboard. It's not a failure, it's data.
Exactly. And we understand that the term sovereignty can sound a bit intimidating, perhaps a bit grand. But think of sovereignty simply as authorship, the ability to be the author of your own choices, rather than a passenger reacting to external forces. This deep dive continues our exploration of the 6 levels of the pathway to sovereignty: survival, stability, self-awareness, integrity, wholeness, and freedom. Each one represents a different relationship between what we do and, crucially, why we do it.
And we want to assure you, the listener, that you absolutely do not need to memorize these levels right now. Don't worry about that at all. We have a complimentary resource linked in the description, which lists each level, details how they feel in the body, and includes reflection exercises you can use later. We will definitely remind you about that again at the end.
Mhm. And we should also mention, as the article suggests, that integration really requires practice. It's not just intellectual understanding. The journal, Your Path to Choosing Joy, which is available on Amazon, provides a detailed 11-day journey. It guides you through the process of making space for meaningful yeses and opening room for joy in your life, building on these exact principles.
That structural practice is key, isn't it? Because we need a map sometimes. It is helpful to position the pathway as a staircase. That's a useful metaphor, I think. We are climbing from powerlessness to alignment, from a place where we are reacting to external demands to a place where our actions are dictated by internal truth.
That's a great way to put it. And this staircase isn't linear, crucially. We move up and down constantly, sometimes within a single afternoon, depending on our energy, our environment, our circumstances. Understand the levels simply gives us a map of where we currently stand in relationship to our own sovereignty. It allows us to ask, am I contracting from a place of fear, or am I expanding from a place of truth right now?
Okay, let's start mapping that movement now. Let's show how each level reveals what is truly driving our actions and what the body is communicating. We begin at the bottom, level 1, where the contraction is most intense.
Yes, level 1, survival, which is complete powerlessness. At this foundational level, the body often feels frozen or tense or even numb. You feel completely overwhelmed, perhaps afraid of what will happen if you stop or rest or refuse something. This isn't just discomfort. This is real neurological fear of consequences. Financial ruin, social exclusion, maybe even physical harm in some situations. The voice in your head says, I have no choice. My survival depends on this yes.
And for many people, that statement is factually true, isn't it? If a person truly has no choice due to financial precarity, say, how is their exhaustion information and not just an inevitable, unavoidable cost?
That is a crucial question, and it's important to honor that reality. The exhaustion is often the inevitable cost in those situations. But the information is that your body is signaling unsustainability. The moment of sovereignty here isn't necessarily saying no to the overtime when the rent is due that might not be possible. It's about recognizing the cost of that yes, acknowledging it fully. The body communicates through depletion so complete that feeling anything becomes difficult. You might experience dissociation. Your hands might be moving, doing the task, but you are not quite inside them. There's a distant quality to your awareness.
Right. So the invitation at this very difficult level is simple but profound. Where in my body have I stopped feeling safe to pause? Just noticing that. The threshold to move towards the next step is recognizing that exhaustion is information, not failure. You are gathering data on the state of your existence, really.
Exactly. Moving up one step, we hit level 2, stability or reactive power. The tension shifts here slightly. It is no longer frozen fear, but more like frantic active control. The breath becomes staccato, shallow, quick. The jaw sets. The mind races through endless lists of things to fix, prevent, or manage. You feel you need control or approval or order to feel secure.
Oh, okay. So the internal voice here is, if I don't do it, everything will fall apart.
Mm.
This is the yes of constant proving, where you rescue situations, manage outcomes, and ensure nothing slips through the cracks. It's the manager who can't delegate, perhaps, or the friend who insists on planning every single detail of the group trip. The body stays in a state of alert, doesn't it? Muscles coiled and ready to fix, solve, or prevent disaster. It's a low-grade, constant fight response.
Spot on. And that state of coiled readiness sounds exhausting, because it absolutely is. You are expending energy on every potential problem, not just the real ones happening right now. The invitation here is challenging, yet liberating. What would happen if I stopped rescuing everything? Just considering it. The threshold for growth here is seeing how this constant vigilance keeps the nervous system chronically activated, trapping you in a cycle of perceived urgency, even when external threats have passed.
This is where things start to get truly interesting, I think, because most functional people probably live somewhere between level 2 and level 3 much of the time. Next is the pivotal stage, level 3, self-awareness or ego empowerment. Here, something genuinely shifts because you start observing your own patterns without immediately defending them.
Exactly. In stability level 2, you are fixing because you genuinely believe things will collapse if you don't. In self-awareness level 3, you might still be fixing, but you're doing it partly because it makes you feel important or needed or capable, and you start to realize maybe that the fixing doesn't actually bring you joy or peace. The body still alternates between tension and fatigue, that Sunday exhaustion after a busy week of proving. But there is an awareness of the imbalance now.
So the body is still contracted, perhaps, but the mind is starting to separate from the compulsion. You might be successful, productive, busy, but a quiet voice inside asks, is this what I actually want? The internal voice changes to something like, I must prove my worth. Or maybe I need to earn my keep.
hmm The article describes the professional who achieves the promotion but feels strangely empty afterwards, or the volunteer who realizes they are serving to be seen to get that external validation, rather than to truly serve the cause itself from the heart. You are aware of the pattern of seeking validation through output, but you still haven't given yourself permission to stop or change it. That awareness alone, though, is the transformative step. It's huge.
Yeah, awareness is key. So the invitation is, what am I truly trying to earn? Is it love? Is it approval? Is it safety? Getting really honest. The threshold for growth is observing your patterns with curiosity instead of judgment, pausing to ask what you genuinely desire rather than what you feel you should desire or what you must earn.
And now we cross a critical line, moving into the upper half of the staircase, towards true devotion and that feeling of expansion we talked about. Level 4. Integrity or intellectual sovereignty. Here, the physical state begins to settle significantly. The jaw might unlock, the shoulders drop a little, the breath deepens, reaching lower into the belly. There is a growing calm, a sense of being grounded in one's own center. Warmth begins to return to the body, perhaps in the hands or chest.
Okay, so this is the first place where the body starts to relax because you are consciously choosing truth over performance, even if it's hard. The internal voice affirms the shift. This feels right, even if it costs me something. Maybe it costs social ease or an old identity. This is where devotion begins to emerge, not necessarily as a grand gesture, but as small choices made from inner truth rather than external expectation.
Exactly. The body relaxes because it no longer needs to defend itself against its own knowing. You are starting to align your actions with your inner state. You are choosing the path of less resistance internally, even if it causes a brief external conflict or awkwardness. The invitation at this level asks, what choice would bring peace rather than performance?
Peace rather than performance. That's powerful. Then we reach level 5, wholeness or spiritual sovereignty. This sounds like a profound shift in our capacity for connection, both with self and others. The body opens up, the breath becomes rhythmic, maybe like waves, as the article suggests. Movement feels more fluid, more expressive. You realize that giving without connection drains both the giver and the receiver.
That's it. The voice says, I act because love moves through me. Or maybe energy or purpose, something larger than obligation. The core definition here is giving from fullness, not from fear of emptiness. The service is nourishing because it sustains both the giver and the receiver. Your chest expands. Your voice might carry a different quality, slower, richer, more connected. The invitation is, how does it feel when I let my actions arise from fullness?
And the threshold here is allowing life or energy or love to move through the body instead of trying to control every single outcome. It's the release of the need to force results, trusting that true action comes from flow, from that deeper place. This sounds like the real embodiment of the devotional yes.
It really is heading in that direction. And finally, the peak, level 6, freedom or transcendent sovereignty. Here the body is spacious, relaxed, deeply present. There is lightness in your step, ease in your gestures. Joy is expressed naturally without effort.
The voice is simply, my yes comes from truth, not from fear. And as you said, this is not a permanent state. Nobody lives here all the time. But it is a place you learn to recognize and inhabit more frequently. Action becomes a natural extension of being, not something you have to muster up. The invitation is, how does my body express joy when I live from this place? The practice of returning to inner truth is the sovereignty itself.
Beautifully put.
Now, these 6 levels can sound a bit academic, maybe a bit abstract, but they live in the bodies of real people every day. The article titled, When You Say Yes Out of Obligation versus Out of Devotion, shares 3 incredibly insightful personal stories that show how we shift from reaction to truth through small, defining choices. These shifts are what help us move up that staircase we talked about.
Yeah, these stories really bring it to life. Let's start with Daniel, the reliable one. Daniel built his life on responsibility. He was the person everyone depended on, and he wore his reliability like armor, But beneath that armor, his self-worth had quietly merged with his output. He didn't really feel valuable unless he was doing things for others. He was functioning largely at survival and stability levels 1 and 2. He believed deep down that if he stopped producing, he would somehow disappear or become worthless.
Oh, I recognize that pattern. The critical contraction for him came during what the article calls the weekend he could not rest. He finally decided to take a long weekend off, but his body literally did not know what to do with stillness. He felt physically unwell. He paced, checked emails compulsively, felt his pulse quickening for no external reason. He had this deep, pervasive restlessness.
And that racing pulse was critical information, wasn't it? His body was showing him that rest felt like danger. His nervous system had learned to run on constant demand, constant output. The exhaustion he carried wasn't weakness. It was withdrawal from a constant state of emergency he'd created internally. He'd been living in level 2, stability for too long, always coiled, always ready to prevent collapse, real or imagined.
I can really relate to that, the feeling that you are somehow apologizing for your own existence if you are not constantly busy or productive. The shift for Daniel came about 2 weeks later. He canceled dinner plans with a friend and prepared this lengthy, detailed apology, listing all his valid reasons for canceling, bracing himself for the anticipated guilt and judgment. He was fully expecting the need to justify his absence.
Right, building his case. And when his friend simply replied, "That's fine, mate, you don't owe me a reason, rest if you need to," the reaction was apparently seismic for Daniel. Something inside him softened instantly. The tightness in his chest loosened. A clear physical signal of release. He hadn't realized the sheer weight of the apology he carried, the weight of justification, until it was gently dismissed like that.
That moment was his threshold into level 3, self-awareness. He realized he had been apologizing for the mere fact of his existence, really, measuring his worth by how consistently he showed up for others. His friend's easy acceptance suggested that constant availability wasn't the measure of his inherent value. He had achieved a moment of intellectual sovereignty, even if briefly. He saw the pattern.
And his move toward devotion, towards acting from a different place, arrived surprisingly through a creative outlet. Daniel signed up for a photography class. Not to build a portfolio or monetize his skill, importantly, but because he just missed noticing beauty. He felt compelled to stop and simply see the world again, without an agenda.
That's lovely. Through the lens, he started to see light and movement differently. One evening, photographing the way late afternoon sun fell across an ordinary brick wall, he lost track of time entirely. His breathing was slow and even, deeply connected to his belly. He was present without any agenda, not producing anything for anyone, simply witnessing.
And he caught himself smiling, a small, unprompted smile that radiated warmth from within. This shift from achieving to witnessing was his move into wholeness, level 5. Devotion for Daniel was doing from presence. His body taught him that rest and creativity were alignment, not indulgences, and that his purpose wasn't tied solely to his output.
A beautiful shift. Next, let's look at Layla, the giver. As a dedicated nurse, Layla's life revolved around care, but somewhere along the way she had learned to give without receiving, nourishing others without feeding herself. Her body showed her the cost through chronic, dull lower back ache and heavy eyelids that never quite opened fully, that kind of deep weariness.
Yeah, the body keeping score. Her defining contraction moment came after a particularly long shift. She came home utterly spent. When her 8-year-old daughter rushed to her with open arms, calling "Mummy," and wrapping herself around Layla's neck, Layla flinched. It was subtle, involuntary, but unmistakable. Her body recoiled from the very touch it loved most in the world.
Wow. That flinch was her body speaking from survival, wasn't it? Level 1. She realized she'd given so much to so many strangers that even the pure, unconditional love of her child felt like another demand, an extraction of the last tiny reserve of energy she held. The body had given beyond its limit, demonstrating the brutal truth that love without self-connection, without filling your own well, becomes deep depletion.
It's a stark warning. Her shift, her move towards self-awareness, level 3, was sparked by an elderly patient she'd been caring for. The patient took Layla's hand one day and noted with quiet compassion, "You do everything right, dear. The technique is perfect, but there's no light in your eyes when you do it."
Oh, that must have landed heavily. That external recognition that she had traded genuine presence and heart for mechanical productivity, it awakened an old memory of her original purpose, perhaps, and the joy she used to find in her work. The patient had essentially called out the performance.
Exactly. So Layla's devotion practice began small, shifting her from level 3 towards level 4, integrity. Each morning before work, she would place her hands over her heart and set the intention. May what I give today come from fullness. Just that simple act. She started taking deliberate 30-second pauses between patients, just to feel her feet on the floor and recenter her breath. Tiny resets. She was actively choosing truth over automatic performance.
Small changes, big impact. One afternoon, helping a frightened patient prepare for surgery, she felt a profound change internally. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, down her arms. Her movement slowed naturally. She was not performing care. Care was flowing through her. She felt like the conduit, not the depleted source.
Yes, this was her move into wholeness level 5. Her body had relaxed back into service again, confirming that the work became devotion when care flowed through her existing well of energy, not scraped from the bottom of her personal depletion. She learned that a full heart gives more effectively, more sustainably than an empty one, regardless of how many hours she worked.
Such an important lesson.
Hmm.
Finally, we have Terry, the partner who stayed. Terry and her partner had achieved a stable long-term relationship, but the early spontaneous tenderness had faded into routine and habit. Her contraction showed up in intimacy, where she was performing the role of loving partner rather than truly embodying it.
During a routine kiss, she noticed her body involuntarily lean slightly away. Her spine curved back almost imperceptibly, creating a physical distance even as her mouth moved forward. This was survival manifesting in intimacy, level 1 again. Her affection had become performance aimed at avoiding conflict or disruption, maintaining the status quo.
Right. She felt the tightness across her collarbone and realized she was going through the motions to maintain a false peace. The fear was that honesty would create rupture, so she endured the quiet, slow death of genuine connection instead. She was choosing obligation to the relationship structure over devotion to its truth.
That's a painful place to be. Her defining shift came when her partner gently asked, "Is something wrong? You seem distant." Terry's first impulse was the automatic denial. "Everything's fine," the well-rehearsed line. But she paused. She actually placed her hand on the kitchen counter to steady herself, feeling the tremor of fear, and chose to say, "I don't know, I think maybe something is."
Just that slight shift, that admission was her threshold into self-awareness level 3. It cost her something, the comfort of the known fiction, but she saw that her loyalty had become obligation and her affection a duty. She chose to risk rupture with honesty, rather than endure the slow, quiet disappearance of genuine connection.
A courageous choice. Terry's devotion practice was focused on pausing before responding to touch, noticing what was true in her body in that moment, choosing integrity, level 4. One evening, her partner hugged her while she was washing dishes. Instead of automatically leaning back or automatically leaning in performatively, she just stopped and breathed. For a full minute, apparently, there was just stillness and the sound of running water.
Allowing the truth to surface.
Exactly. Then a warmth began to spread from her center, genuine and unhurried. She leaned into him, not from duty, but from a flicker of real, returning tenderness. This small, authentic gesture was her climb towards wholeness, level 5.
Wow.
She learned that devotion cannot be manufactured. It must be invited through honesty, breath, and presence. Her body taught her to love from reality, from what was true now, not from the memory of how things were supposed to be or the fear of things falling apart.
So, as Helen Madiba writes in the article, these 3 journeys all illustrate the core principle. Devotion is an overflow of truth. All 3, Daniel, Layla, and Terry, climbed the staircase by making one small choice, often in a single moment, rooted in physical honesty, listening to their bodies.
Precisely. Now let's move into the felt map phase for you, the listener. Moving from this intellectual understanding of the levels to your own embodied experience, think of this as guided inner exploration. Notice which story echoes your own life. Where do you recognize your version of Daniel or Layla or Terry? Which level do you think you spend most of your time on currently?
Take a moment now, just a brief pause. Think of one place where your yes feels heavy. Maybe it's a social commitment, a responsibility at work, or an expectation within your family. Allow the memory of that obligatory yes to surface, without judgment, just observation. Gently bring it to mind.
And as you hold that memory, feel for the body signals we described earlier. The tight jaw, perhaps. The held breath. The weight in the chest. Notice if you are slightly leaning away, maybe even now, or if your muscles are coiled, ready to spring into action or defense. This contraction is the physiological sign of obligation. Just notice it.
Now ask yourself internally, allowing the body to answer first before the mind jumps in. Where am I acting from duty and where am I acting from aliveness? Just listen for the subtle feeling.
Okay, now let's consciously shift to expansion. Recall a moment when your yes felt effortless and alive. A moment when you were deeply engaged, lost in flow, where time dissolved and joy was naturally expressed. This could be playing with a child, working on a passion project, simply walking in nature, listening to music, anything. Bring that memory forward.
What did that feel like in your body? Was there warmth, spaciousness, fluidity in your limbs, a deep breath you didn't have to force? Hold the image, the feeling of that ease. Let it fill you for a moment.
What changes in your physical experience when your yes comes from alignment rather than fear? The answers, as the article reiterates so clearly, live in the body, not just in the thoughts. The tightening or softening in a single moment is the body speaking its truth. That's a true indicator of obligation or devotion.
So the foundational practice, the key to starting the journey up the pathway, really begins with a single question asked in a single moment. Before your next automatic yes escapes your mouth, just pause. Take one breath, feel your body, and ask, is this obligation or devotion?
That simple moment of awareness, that pause, is the beginning of sovereignty. It is level 3. Self-awareness in action. It interrupts the automatic pilot. To help solidify this practice, the article provides some specific reflection questions for you to take away and consider deeply over the coming days.
First, am I staying in this job out of obligation or devotion? This requires checking your body regularly. Does the thought of going to work fill you with dread or quiet purpose? What's the dominant feeling?
Second, is my care for this particular person flowing from fullness or depletion? If you help someone, do you feel a quiet energy boost afterwards? Or do you feel a slump that lasts for hours? The body knows the truth of the transaction.
And third, am I giving in this relationship from fear of loss or from genuine love? This kind of honest inquiry, rooted in the physical truth of the body, is the only way to reclaim the energy we lose when we perform instead of live authentically.
When we tie this entire discussion back to sovereignty and choice, the physical truth is just undeniable, isn't it? When you say yes out of obligation, your energy contracts to survive. The chest tightens, energy drains away. When you say yes out of devotion, it expands to serve, to connect, to create. The spine lengthens, energy circulates freely.
Your body and heart always know the difference. Listening to those signals, honoring them, is the very first act of sovereignty. Climbing the staircase is about transforming that draining obligation into fulfilling meaning by checking in with your physical reality first, moment by moment.
And to continue this practice, remember those resources we mentioned earlier. The free guided meditation and integration guide, which includes the full Pathway to Sovereignty resource with all the levels detailed, is available for you to access immediately in the description below.
Yeah, do check that out. And for those who want a structured, sustained practice to really embed this, the journal, Your Path to Choosing Joy on Amazon, is available. It guides you through an 11-day journey of conscious choosing, making space for those meaningful yeses, and opening room for more joy in your life.
And finally, just a compassionate note to end on. The Pathway to Sovereignty is a framework for self-reflection. It is not a replacement for professional therapy. If these reflections feel overwhelming, or if you find yourself struggling with deep-seated patterns of obligation and fatigue that significantly disrupt your life, please consider reaching out to a trained therapist or counselor. It takes courage, not weakness, to seek support when you need it.
Climb the staircase, breath by breath, with compassion and presence we rise from stress, from fear to peace, from shame to grace. Climb the staircase to sovereignty. When you feel unsafe, too much to bear, you shut down a flare, you vanish or glare, your heart beats fast, your breath runs tight, you just want out or to make it right. That's survival, the you that just wants to survive.
What you feel is complete powerlessness, a cry for safety, not for success.
Climb the staircase, breath by breath, with compassion and presence we rise from stress, from fear to peace, from shame to grace. Climb the staircase to sovereignty.
When you feel the pressure to fix or prove, you hustle hard, you never stop or move. You shrink your voice to keep control. You manage the threat, but it takes a toll. There's stability, the you that's trying to keep things intact.
What you feel is the pattern unwind. You are no longer lost in the mind. Climb the staircase, breath by breath. Let presence be your stair.